This screencast is going to explain how to find the area of triangles. So the first thing that we need to talk about is what area is. An area is just the inside surface of a shape. So it's the inside of a shape. You're finding how much that shape covers or how much space is inside of a given shape. So in order to find the area of a triangle, we are actually going to use a formula that's very similar to one that you've used before. Because if you think about the triangle, a triangle is actually half of a square or a rectangle. So we are going to use a very similar formula, and that is base times height. But because we're looking at only half of a rectangle or half of a square, we're going to then multiply that times 1/2. So we have a formula 1/2 times base times height. Or some of you may be familiar with the formula of base times height divided by 2. That's the exact same thing. So you can use one or the other. Remember, this is also on your formula sheet, so you can reference this anytime. You'll see that they use the formula of area equals 1/2 times base times height as their formula. So let's go ahead and take a look at our first example. You'll see that I drew this so it's not true to scale, all that stuff, but it is a triangle. It has 3 sides, and this is what we would actually call an equilateral triangle because all 3 sides are the same length. So in order to find the area of a triangle, we have to identify 2 parts. We need to identify the base, and we need to identify the height. So in this particular example, our base is going to be our bottom side, so that's going to be 6. But now we have to figure out what side is our height. You'll notice that there is a dotted line drawn down the middle of my triangle, and that actually is going to create a right angle with my base. This would be my height. The height and the base of a triangle always form a right angle. As you can see over here in the example that's on your formula sheet, you'll see the base and the height always form that right angle. So now we use our formula and we rewrite it. And you'll see that I have 1/2 times 6 times 5. I would suggest doing the 6 times 5 first, which is 30, times 1/2, or half of 30, is going to be 15 centimeters, and then that is squared because we're looking at area. So we're multiplying 2 of the same dimensions or measurements by the same thing, so that would be why it would be squared. Make sure that you're doing this half part, 1/2 times whatever number. Another example that you might see is a scalene triangle, where all of the sides are different. It's kind of uglier. It doesn't really make a pretty triangle. It's weird looking. And you're still going to identify your base and your height on your triangle. I would suggest going through and right away identifying what your base is and what your height is. In this case, you'll see that we have a dotted line going on the outside of our triangle. I just highlighted that in blue. This is just an imaginary line that's drawn in so that you can identify what your height is. So in this case, our height is 4. Now what's our base? Our base has to create a right angle with our height. This 3-inch line is one side that could be our base. We have 7 inches or we have 5 inches. 3 inches is the side that creates the right angle with our height. Even though it doesn't extend the whole way out to the height, it still creates that right angle. So our base would be 3 inches. So we're still going to use our same formula and fill in what we know. So 1/2 times 3 times 4. 3 times 4 is 12. Half of 12 is 6. So my area would be 6 inches squared. Let's take a look at one more example. This is called a right triangle. In a right triangle, your base and height are going to be pretty apparent because they already create that right angle, which is why it's called a right triangle. So in this case, the 4 feet would be my base, 5 feet would be my height. I fill in my formula. 4 times 5 is 20. Half of 20 is 10. So my area of that triangle would be 10 feet squared. Now it's your turn, so what I want you to do is pause the video, go ahead and solve and find the area of these 3 triangles using your base and height, then press play and check your answers with mine. So as you can see, for number 1, you should have gotten 10 centimeters squared. Number 2 should be 6 feet squared, and number 3 should be 3 centimeters squared. So check your answers. Make sure you're looking at my work to see if it matches yours. If you didn't get them correct, chances are you might not have multiplied by 1/2 or divided by 2. So just as a reminder, here are your 2 formulas that you can use to find the area of a triangle. And then also remembering that your base and height create a right angle. So that's really important, especially when they throw a bunch of numbers on a triangle. You need to be able to identify the base and the height and what numbers are the base and the height of that triangle. So keep these equations in mind. Remember that you also have your formula sheet to reference when you're trying to find the area of a triangle.